Yeah, I'm very happy to have you here in the Fichteconcerthall. And so, Victor, you moved to Berlin 10 years ago. That's what you told me. And yeah, and for this event, you're going to play here. And that's why I would like to do this video, to introduce you a bit, talk about your idea about Busoni, because this is going to be a Busoni concert, something very special. Okay, but let's start at the very beginning. Do you remember when you moved to Berlin? What was the thing you liked about Berlin when you came here?
Oh, well, first of all, very nice to be here. I'm very happy that I'll be able to play here in this lovely concert hall. To start off with that, about Berlin, I think it's all a matter of comparing, of context. So I was coming from London, so of course things that London had and I disliked and Berlin didn't have, or the other way around, things that Berlin had and I liked and London lacked, I would enjoy very much. First of all, the fact that there were fewer people, it was less busy. At that time, it's changed, of course, in the ensuing 10 years, but it was, it was quite shocking that I could go out in the afternoon or evening and take the underground and be able to have a seat, be able to sit. This is was rather inconceivable in London at that time. Just as an example, also, I really enjoyed the street lighting. I was living in West Berlin at the time, and I found it very soothing, so kind of unintrusive. So the whole city was a little bit darker. It felt more relaxed once the night came in and the evening came in. In London, I not everywhere, but in many places where I lived, I found the street lights very bright at night, and I don't know, I preferred them in Berlin. It's maybe a strange thing, but that is one. Those are, I remember exactly that those were the things that I enjoyed as I moved here.
Yeah, we have a very nice street lighting in the Fichtestraße actually. We still have gaslight.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that more expensive?
Yeah, it's a lot more expensive, and it's not energy efficient.
As long as you keep just one of those, like one or two streets, just for historical purposes, I guess that's fine. Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's important. Okay, so you came to Berlin, and then when did you get in contact to Busoni? Have you been in contact, or did you know about Busoni before? What did you know about Busoni?
Well, I was thinking about this yesterday even. The first time I had heard the name Busoni was in relation to an edition of the Well-Tempered Clavier. I must have been, I don't know, 10 or 12. I think my piano teacher at the time mentioned that there were 3 editions that were being used. There's the Czerny, the Mugelini, and the Busoni. Now, the Busoni was not very well regarded at the time, but I believe I played the Prelude and Fugue in, I think the one in G major from the first book, in Busoni's edition. So that was the first time, and then I had heard more about him as a composer once I went to London, and I started exploring a lot of scores and recordings that I didn't have access to back home in Romania. And I discovered his music. I think I listened to some pieces straight away when I went to London in 2003. It didn't really appeal to me at the time, but then some years ago I kind of rediscovered it. A student of my then teachers, Andrew Ball, who himself is a great admirer of Busoni. So the student was playing a piece by Busoni. I didn't know at the time it was Busoni, and I was kind of taken with it. And I thought, well, what is this? I've never heard anything like it. It sounded similar to other things, but also very foreign. And then I found out it was the Sonatina Seconda, which is one of the pieces which I'll be performing. And a couple of months later, I decided, you know what, I want to play this too. And then I played it, and I played it for my final exam that year. This was already in 2007. No, sorry. Yeah, 2007, 2008, something like that. And then I started being interested in more and more of Busoni's music. I got more interested in his opera Dr. Faust. Then once I moved to Berlin, I also got a biography, which I read. And then having read that biography, I realized I lived 2 minutes away from where Busoni himself used to live in Berlin, which is in Viktoria-Luise-Platz. I lived nearby there. And I went to visit. Unfortunately, the original building doesn't exist anymore. We have a Neubau because the old one was destroyed during the war. So yeah, that's how I kind of came to today. As kind of from 2007 onwards, my interest has been ongoing, and I've been learning a lot of pieces and reading a lot about him and reading his writings as well.
And is there something a special piece you love the most?
Actually, yes. Off the top of my head, I would say the first Sonatina, which I'll also be playing here. I think that might be my favorite piece. I don't know whether if it's the best piece by Busoni, the most successful piece, but I think it's the piece I like the most. I think it's the most unusual journey, and the most unusual journey in terms of sonority and in terms of narrative. So somewhere between narrative and spatial, if I can say that makes sense. Yeah, so it was probably that.
So you think unusual in terms of the Busoni style, or unusual as a piano piece?
Well, probably both. Probably both. Even I would say even within his style, I think he described it himself as a little more feminine. He was describing his first sonatina, his Sonatina Seconda, his second sonatina, and he was saying, if the first sonatina is a little more feminine, then the second one is a little more masculine. And I think this kind of delicacy and sonorous quality that not all of Busoni's music has, I don't think. I think sometimes the sonorities are not easy to bring out on a piano, but I believe in the first sonatina, it really has this kind of richness and clarity in terms of registration. That's quite particular, I would say, for him. Interestingly enough, I was looking through Chopin's Fourth Ballad recently, and I noticed a lot of piano writing that seemed quite similar to that strikingly similar to passages from the first sonatina. And there is a not very often spoken about essay by Busoni, and it's not really spoken about because it, especially in this day and age, it probably doesn't reflect too well on him, where he says that Chopin is quite... He takes issue with what he perceives as Chopin's femininity, and he thinks this is not a positive quality. I mean, I'm kind of simplifying it a lot, but he was being very critical of Chopin's style in a way. Not everything. I mean, he played quite a lot of Chopin's music, but some things. And so anyway, this piece definitely. And also, you asked me if it's unusual in the grander scheme of piano literature. I would say yes. I think the structure is very unusual. It's kind of episodic, but at the same time, everything really sits together. It really makes sense, and to me at least, and hopefully I'll be able to convey that to the public as well. Where you go into a different world, but somehow something familiar always creeps up to help you along, even if it's a different world, a different, some different notes, some different ornamentation, some different chords. It's kind of a constant exploration, but the familiar always kind of creeps in somehow.
This was actually something that made me wondering when I was listening to you in the background when you were practicing at my place. I didn't know the pieces, but I discovered some familiar things. But then it drove away into a different sphere, and then it got back, and this was something really fascinating.
This is very much his style, because he likes to try different things, and he likes to try a bit of everything. Actually, you'll hear, you might hear some very dissonant pieces in this program. For instance, kind of, let's call them atonal, and then you'll hear some things which sound a lot more traditional in a sense, a lot more tonal, not completely, but a lot more. And you'd think, there's this evolution from the more tonal music to the more, something a little less conventional, moving away from key centers and so on. But it's actually the other way around. Like, one of the most not rooted in tonality pieces is the Sonatinas, which is the second of the set, and then the subsequent third sonatina is actually a lot more conventional in terms of harmony, in terms of tonality. I don't think he thought there's an evolution towards getting rid of tonality. For instance, he just wanted to try this, wanted to try that. He just wanted to explore all the possibilities rather than say, okay, I'm not going to use this at all, and I'm just going to focus on this side of musical possibilities. You'll just take in everything.
There was this Busoni exhibition in Berlin. I'm sure you were there.
2 or 3 times? Three times, actually. And I have the catalog as well.
Me too. Okay. If you remember the first time when you went to the exhibition, what did you discover that really, was it maybe a surprise or something you discovered that you were thinking, oh, this is something special I didn't know about? Or do you remember?
Yes, very vividly. It's his ability to draw and sketch. I think I may have seen some copies of postcards and things like that, but I saw some other drawings. Like, there was one drawing of a concert hall, like a sketch, kind of architectural sketch, and I was struck by how well it was drawn. Also, looking at his calligraphy of his early counterpoint and orchestration exercises, I think so. I think that was it. From when he was young, it's all impeccably drawn. I think that was a surprise.
Do you think there's a relationship between his drawing and his music?
This is speculation, but I think he may have conceived of a lot of things spatially. I think it's very possible. For instance, if you take one of his largest works, his most important works, the Fantasia Contrapuntistica, in the 2-piano version, he made a formal plan which was in the shape of a Gothic cathedral. This is kind of you can find it even on, if you find an edition of the piece, it's there, and kind of the different sections are kind of different compartments of that particular architectural drawing.
And why did you decide to go to the exhibition for a second and third time?
You always miss things. You see things, and it's so much. I would go to a museum usually if I can, which is why, for instance, one thing which was good about London, you could go to a museum several times because most of them were with free admission, is you always miss something. And I'm more of a sprinter rather than marathon runner intellectually. I focus intensely for a bit, and then I need a break. And I'm pretty sure I discovered things on the next 2 visits.
One thing about Busoni is very obvious. He has very strong relationships to other composers. Actually, the first time I heard about Busoni was in the context of Bach-Busoni transcriptions piece, whatever. What is your view on other composers related to Busoni? What do you think? What was an important, or the most important influence on him? Or would you say that it's hard to determine because there are so many explicit references?
Well, I would say I can't name one. I would name three, though. Possibly more, but definitely three. Bach, of course. I mean, Busoni was an avid contrapuntalist. There's something contrapuntal going on in most pieces. But also, maybe not from the earliest stages, probably later on Mozart. It's extremely important to him. And I think Liszt as well. Not always, sometimes in the way Liszt writes for the piano and how that inspired Busoni, but also in the way Liszt approaches other composers and their material.
You selected one Liszt piece as a first piece.
I did.
For the concert. Why this piece?
Well, I was thinking to play something by either a piece which is slightly better known than the other pieces I'll be playing, or by a composer which is a little more familiar, and try to make a link to it. And I felt, well, I had played this piece many years ago. I had even played it in a program where I played a piece by Busoni as well, and I thought it kind of works. It has this sort of free exploration quality to it. It's not extraordinarily complex, but I can't really put it into words, but something there connects to some aspects of Busoni in a way in which I think a listener could maybe pick up on.
Yeah, that's very true. I listened to the piece actually. I think it fits very well.
Okay, great. Great. I'm happy to hear that.
No, it's a short piece, and I think it opens a world to that what comes next. Very nice. Okay, let's talk about the Sonatinas.
Yes.
You decided to record the Sonatinas.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, I'm trying to find a way to put this which doesn't sound arrogant or anything like that. Well, I like this music very much, and this is not music which is extremely well known or extremely well liked, or I would even say, as somebody who likes this stuff, even something that's easy to like. And I had heard some recordings, and I felt they don't exactly convey the sound quality that I feel is best for this music. This was at that time. There are some which are actually quite good. I can think of two recordings of the Sonatinas which actually I think are going in a direction which do them justice. And I thought, maybe I can bring to the world a version which is, either easier to like or just something different. I'm not going to say I have the answer, but something else, like a different view on sonority of these pieces.
Can you coin this difference somehow?
Right. Well, I can, because I've thought about this for a long time, actually. I can do it by comparison to the other recordings. I found some of them had a sound which was very direct. It was quite, I would say, hard in the recording, and this is to do with player, with the piano, with the acoustic, with the way it's recorded. And there were others which were quite roomy. Like there's a lot of, you could feel a lot of hall, so there was quite a bit of reverb. And reverb works a little better for some pieces not. I wanted something in between, something which has a bit of space, has a bit of room, but is also intimate. So, but definitely not direct and definitely not very, very big. So that's what I was going for. So an intimate, sonorous sound. And I think on the first few listenings of the cuts we have, I think we might have it.
Looking forward to that.
So am I. I have to listen to the final cuts now and just hear how that sounds. Anyway.
Okay. Getting from the Sonatinas now to your piece, you're going to play, because you're going starting with Liszt, then you will play the Sonatinas, and finally a piece you wrote. So when did you start writing music?
When I started writing music, I guess I must have been somewhere between 12 and 14. I think I must have finished some kind of sonata movement or something when I was about 14. And I kept on the interest, and I did it somewhat seriously. Shortly after writing a couple of pieces, I started taking some lessons in analysis and counterpoint, harmony, etc., etc. And then I studied as I did composition alongside piano at university, and I kept composing to this day. That's about it.
Is there a relationship between your compositions and Busoni?
I would say yes. I wouldn't say all compositions. I would say some of them have, if not a direct Busonian connection, because except for this piece, which I'm going to play, has a very direct, is very much an homage, so it has, I would say, a lot of influences. Some others were probably influenced, let's say, in spirit, so kind of looking at the Sonatina Seconda or Dr. Faust. Back around 10 years ago, I wrote a piece or two which had this sort of mystical yearning, which I found in his music, and I was kind of, so not necessarily by the sounds themselves, but more by the concept behind the pieces, like the grand, let's say, spiritual idea behind it. So that was that back then.
The spiritual idea, is this, can you describe it?
Well, I think it's, yes, I think it's, in his case, it's a yearning for, or kind of description of a feeling which is to do with sensing that there's something beyond. You can't actually see it, but you kind of, you have an intuition about it. So it's kind of that feeling. It's not something explicit, but you have this feeling that there's something there. You don't quite know what it is, but it's there. It's almost like knowing that there's a secret, knowing that there is a mystery. I would say that's kind of my interpretation of the spirituality behind it, or the kind of the emotional, spiritual content behind it.
Talk about future. After the Busoni recording, do you have anything in the back of your head you want to do next?
Yes, I do. So I would like to do something with Busoni's music and a visual medium, because I think a visual medium which is recognizable can support music which is probably, especially unfamiliar music, can seem a lot more abstract. I've lived this myself, as despite not being a big fan of the Second Viennese school, I listened to the opera Wozzeck, and through that narrative, which was relatable, I was able to get to this musical language which was not really open to me before.